My name is Bettina Warburg. I'm a researcher of transformative technologies and co-founder of Animal Ventures. Today, I've been challenged to explain one concept at 5 levels of increasing complexity. My topic is blockchain technology. Blockchain is a new network, and it's going to help us decentralize trade, allowing us to do a lot of our transactions much more peer-to-peer directly and lower our use of intermediaries like companies or banks maybe. I think today everyone can leave understanding something about blockchain at some level. Do you know what we're going to talk about today? It's called blockchain.
What's blockchain?
That's a really good question. It's actually a way that we can trade. Do you know what trade is?
It's when you take turns doing something. It's when you give up most of what you want, right?
When you give up most of what you want? Well, sometimes that definitely happens for sure. What if I told you that there's a kind of technology that I work on that means you could trade with any kid all over the world?
Really?
Yeah.
If I could trade with any kid, I would trade something I don't like so much.
That's probably a good idea. Maybe somebody else likes it more than you do. So normally, when people trade, they have to go to the store or they have to know the person so that they can get what they asked for. With blockchain, you can make that exact same trade, but you don't need the store and you don't even necessarily need to know the other person.
Really?
So Ian, do you know what blockchain is?
No.
Have you ever traded or sold anything?
Actually, I'm selling my computer on eBay right now.
That's amazing. What made you decide to trade on eBay?
Well, I mean, I've heard of it and I trust it a lot because they have like all of their guarantees. So I know that I'm gonna get money and the person's gonna get what they want.
So what if I told you that blockchain technology is basically a tool where you can do the exact same thing, but it goes to you and I directly. You wouldn't need an eBay or a brand in between.
That's cool.
And there's a lot of those kinds of middlemen like in our society today, right? We have a lot of banks, we have a lot of companies that sort of help us make sure that our trades happen. But if we could guarantee the same trade using technology as sort of like a technological trust, then we wouldn't really need all those middlemen in between.
So how does it work?
It's basically a network of computers that all have the same history of transactions. And so instead of sort of there being one company with one database that holds all the information, the same sort of list is held by all these different people, like you could have it on your computer. And then it gets validated by everyone, and basically that turns into the next part of the list. So it's sort of constantly updating itself.
So like, how do you make sure that it's secure?
So it uses cryptography, and that helps it basically encode all of the transactions. So you can't really see exactly what happened, but you know it happened because it's like a marker.
So you could kind of like, I don't know, say you trade apples, but you would just see like random letters for it, so you wouldn't be able to like track it, I guess?
Exactly.
That's cool.
So it's kind of this like really big ledger or accounting system for all sorts of things that get traded, but instead of being owned by one company, it's owned by everybody.
That's cool.
Yeah. We're going to talk about blockchain technology. Have you heard of blockchain?
I've heard of the words blockchain, but I'm not sure I know what it is.
So when we were much smaller societies, you and I could trade in our community pretty easily. But as the distance in our trade grew, we ended up inventing institutions, right? If you use Uber or you use Airbnb or you use Amazon even, these are just digital marketplaces and platforms that help us facilitate an exchange of value. But today we actually have a technology that allows us to trade one-to-one, but at scale, and it's called blockchain technology. There is some kind of interface for it. You could have an app or you could use your computer to do it. But instead of there being a company in the middle, or what's helping you make that transaction, is a bunch of software code. Okay. And so it's being run by all of these different computers that have like a node. So they're all running the same software and guaranteeing your transactions as they happen.
I mean, I would assume this technology is taking away business or activity from these middlemen.
In some cases, yeah, it is. And a lot of people in the financial industry in particular are looking at it from the banking side of how do we use this technology to trade things like Bitcoin or other tokens that are easier to use instead of today's currency. You know, a lot of people think about blockchain as Bitcoin because it's sort of in the news a lot and it's this new cryptocurrency and it's kind of exciting. But we're actually seeing a lot more use cases for blockchain that aren't around the currency side. They're more around how do you take any asset and be able to trade that using this same technology.
Is there a mechanism for verifying that person A is a legitimate seller or producer of the item?
So today, a lot of people are working on how to create identity structures that leverage blockchains. And one of the tools for doing that is being able to cryptographically sign for a given attribute. So your government could sign that you have a US passport, or a university could sign that you are a currently enrolled student. And you could then dole out that information and control it yourself and be able to show people those certifications on an as-needed basis. So today we're going to talk about blockchain technology.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of blockchain?
I have. Whenever we have a transaction, and let's say I buy something from you, this information gets logged and it gets verified by a third person or third party. And then if like all this information verified and it all matches, right, the transaction goes through without any intermediary, basically, right? And it gets stored. And when we make further transactions, this information is already embedded. It's in the ledger.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you can append it. You can sort of add new information that's more current, but you can't actually go erase anything.
Absolutely right. The way the technology is changing, nothing's going to be like it used to be. And there's no like firm and then the buyer and the seller. And it's basically we'll have to rewrite a lot of rules in economics as well.
For sure. A lot of the assumptions won't hold true. Same
Absolutely.
with who are the actors. It's not just people anymore, it's machines.
Absolutely.
We're going to have to create entire new concepts of how they do trade and how they work with us too. What kind of barriers or roadblocks would you imagine are going to happen in the blockchain space?
So at least when we talk about Bitcoin, there are some trust issues. There have been some hacks, and so there's obviously a need to work on trust and feeling that it's a safe technology.
Yeah, one of the problems that Bitcoin has faced is Bitcoin's getting stolen or lost, but a lot of that actually comes from people trying to re-centralize Bitcoin in different ways, making themselves actually a pretty easy target.
Absolutely. So education will be a big part before we actually can use the technology in a wide sense, right?
Yeah, to actually transition into the mainstream and make it useful for average people to use, we're going to need to make sure we have a lot more education, a lot more standards, and probably work with a lot of enterprises to create sort of the user experience around this being a technology that is safe and usable and understandable. What is the current state of blockchain in your understanding? What's going to happen next?
The current state is the research state, and it's being developed to be applied in many areas. It might be used almost everywhere to where like we won't even imagine how we lived without it. But I'm not sure where it's going to go. I mean, no one really knows, right?
Well, we have a lot of public blockchains. Like we have Bitcoin, we have the Ethereum network, NXT, but a lot of companies and consortiums are getting together to build private blockchains, so ones that are more closed off at first and then may evolve into a public network when people feel comfortable using it. And some are also proof of concepts out in the real world. Projects in energy and in pharmaceuticals and in retail and lots of different fields are starting experiments. And we'll see in the next few years how all of those interact and what we learn about the best use cases for blockchain and what it means for trade.